right. We are live on Thursday. I'm Joel Fieri. This is the Faith Filter, and we are going to wait until some commenters come in. Before I show the video, I like to do that so make sure everybody knows what we're talking about. Excuse my voice a little bit. And we're going to talk about world events today, wars and rumors of wars. AC is here. Good morning, AC. And maybe we'll wait for Lucas. Usually comes in unless he's driving his kids to school. So what I'm going to do, like I said, I'm talking about world events, international events, everything, a lot of different things happening around the world. Say what you want about Donald Trump. He gets things done and makes things happen. So I will go ahead and show the video I was going to show to start. Yeah, Lucas might be driving. So, all right, we'll get this going here. This is from CBN, and these guys are talking about in Nigeria, another 160, 170 or so Christians were killed by Islamic militants. And so we had talked about that a few months back, about how these are our Christian brothers and sisters suffering persecution. Is probably the most persecuted spot in the world where Christians are facing the most persecution. I think they said 7 out of 10 Christians that will die for their faith will die in Nigeria. So this is from, like I said, CBN, and they're talking about it. And so we'll just get their take on it here.
Other issues.
It's anything but what's actually happening, which is Christians being martyred for their faith. And I go to Hebrews 13. Continue to remember those in prison as if you were together with them in prison, and those who are mistreated as if you yourself were suffering. And I'm going to come across a little preachy, but I'm actually preaching to myself. We need to have the eyes of what's actually happening to our brothers and sisters in Jesus around the world, and to give us the perspective of their eyes, where it's like, my goodness, almost everything we complain about is so superfluous, so insignificant, so trivial, so privileged, when our brothers and sisters around the world who are standing up for the name of Yeshua are being hacked with machetes and things like that. It's just like, man, like, who cares how much this or that, or like, oh no, the internet's not working, or oh no, I'm stuck in traffic, or oh no, my coworker was rude to me. Like, again, I don't want to come across as preachy, but I think biblically we need to. This is an actual place where empathy is important, because we need to feel the weight of this, and I think biblically, like, we need, like Hebrews 13 says, we need to just not glaze over this, think to ourselves, that was a terrible story I saw on YouTube or on the AP. Anyway, the Super Bowl,
Okay, you get where he's going with that. Oh, Lucas is here. Good. So, good morning. So yeah, that was commentators on CBN, and that was, it was a little preachy, yeah, but it's also, what do we say when we say preachy? We're taking the word of God and actually applying it to ourselves. And he did mention Hebrews 13, which I'll show here, and we'll go over that a little bit. Again, let's see here. Yeah, so I'll stop that screen. Again, me and my struggles with the producing here. But let's take a look at Hebrews 13. And actually, I want to take a look at Hebrews 13, but also what came before it. So in Hebrews 13, what he was saying is verse 3, continue to remember those who are in prison as if you were together with them in prison, and those who are mistreated as if you yourself were suffering. So, and there's every time with these, I show these, it gets a little jumpy, but I want to go back and kind of add to the context of that, to what he's talking about in famous chapter of Hebrews 11. And God is talking about, or the author of Hebrews is talking about the great hall of faith. Okay. How Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, all these great characters that we know exercised faith before Jesus was there, put their faith in. They just acted by what they knew of God, what they knew God wanted them to do, and it was credited to them as righteousness. And I'm going to try and get this out of the way here. So, and in verse 32, it says, "And what more shall I say? Do I not have time to tell you about Gideon, Barak, Samson, and Jephthah? Well, okay. Who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gain." Okay, that's, try something else here. All right, sorry about that. My screen is jumping all over the place and I can't read that. But anyways, it talks about how these people suffered. They lived in caves. They were tortured, and they suffered all kinds of things. And we don't even know who they were. But they suffered all this in expectation for the reward that they were going to receive in eternity, basically with God. All they had was a promise. All they had was, God saying, "Hey, this, because you know me, because you're children, this life is not all there is. We don't live for this life. We live for the life in the future." And because of that, they were able to endure all these horrible injustices. So I'm going to try to see if this one's better, but I wanted to put up what they were talking about, where more extremist killings in Nigeria and I know in I think it was Christmas Eve, that Trump did initiate some strikes against the Islamic militants, and he promised that there would be more if they continued this, and it looks like they have continued it. Again, my technology is really slow. I apologize, but hopefully it's up. Islamic militants killed at least 162 people in attacks in 2 villages in Nigeria, lawmakers say. So, again, armed extremists killed at least 162 people during attacks on 2 villages in Nigeria, one of the deadliest assaults in recent months. One group estimated that the death toll could be higher. So, again, maybe there will be more strikes. But really, of all the things in the world happening, this seems to be the one that we're most powerless to stop. Because it is in the heart of Africa. There's not a lot of people in the United States from that region that would put pressure on us to do something like that, put pressure on our government to do something like that. Those Christians pretty much are on their own. We can send missile attacks on them and make them pay for it. But these are Islamic extremists. They love death more than they love life. So they love killing infidels. They love killing people that aren't of their faith. But they also don't mind dying for their faith because they're promised, their afterlife is promised 72 virgins and liquor and milk flowing, all the things they can't have with their faith down here. So with those Christians, all we can do really is somehow like Hebrews says, somehow consider, like this gentleman was saying, somehow consider that we are suffering with them. And the only thing we can do is cry out to God to help them. And it's kind of a helpless feeling, but hopefully somehow we can put pressure on the government of Nigeria, which is not cooperating at all, which is probably all but happy to have Christians killed in this country. It seems like, because it's not doing anything. I don't know if it's an Islamic government. I assume that it is. I know that half the country is Islamic and half is Christian. So I assume that the Islamic half of the country controls the government of the country. Because I can't imagine that if the Christians were in power, that they would be indifferent to this or actually silently supporting it. So again, it's something that that gentleman from Recipient was saying, it's something we can easily forget. But these are the Christians who are suffering the most. And the Bible does tell us that when one part of the body is hurting, we all hurt. And we need to treat them as if we ourselves are. So again, most of all, we can pray for them. Most of all, we can remember them. At the very least, we can remember them in our prayers. And again, try and put as much pressure on our government to put as much pressure on their government. So that's, like I said, that's the most immediate thing that I see that's actually an effect on the body of Christ. When other Christians in the body of Christ are dying and suffering, we all suffer along with it. So that's kind of an update on that. I know I talked about it a few weeks back, and just said myself included, if I'm not focusing on this, I just must not care. Just because our media, they talked a little bit about how the media will deny that and say it's something other than it is. They'll say it's something, it's just extremist or whatever. No, it's two worldviews clashing, and Christians are bearing the brunt of it. Christians, it's not going the other way. Christians are not attacking Muslims. Radical Islam is attacking Christians. So least of all, let's remember them in our prayers and do all we can somehow to put pressure on our government to keep the pressure up. And I think Trump will. I think he will keep the pressure up on that because it's the right thing to do. So, all right. And also, there are other parts of the world, it seems like so many things are happening. I know in Iran that they are, last count I heard, that could be as much as 30,000 people killed in the streets of Iran. If you remember, another video I did a few weeks back was on the revolution in Iran. I was very hopeful at the time that this would be the overthrow of the Ayatollahs. Think Trump will? Yeah, I think he will too. But Trump's also putting a lot of pressure on Iran, and he's got a lot of our military assets in the region. And Iran is still being quite belligerent about oppressing this uprising of its people. And it's also pursuing, going back to pursuing its nuclear program. Even after, 6 months ago or so, we pretty much wiped out their nuclear capabilities, so we thought. And I'm sure we delivered a huge blow to it, but they're not. They're in this for the long haul. This is their worldview. Jihad is their worldview. They're going to keep fighting, and they're starting to rebuild their nuclear program. And we might have to do this thing all over again. I think the best case scenario is to somehow pull a Maduro type thing where we have to go in and we have to remove their leaders. And I know that there's, I'm not quite, I think it's Khamenei. I don't know if Khamenei is still the Ayatollah, the main leader, but if we can get him, I think we have to get him. I think we have to chase the Islamic leaders, nab as many of them as we can, and chase the rest into Russia, and just have the Iranian people start anew. Have the great Persian people, like Netanyahu said, the great Persian people continue with their revolution and get back. Maybe the Shah's son can come in and take control, have free elections, and start rebuilding that country back to the greatness that it once was, and back to being the ally that it once was with us. And again, just to be that one more beacon of freedom in the Middle East, and most of all, to lop off the head of the snake of Islamic extremism. If Iran can somehow fall and somehow get out of this Islamic extremist mode that it's been in for the last 40 years, almost 50 years, that would mean so much to the world. That would mean so much to the Middle East. Hamas and Hezbollah and all Houthis, all of these rebel groups that are attacking Israel, making trouble in Israel, making trouble in the Middle East, in the Suez Canal, they would have their funding cut off. And that would leave them basically out in the cold. And they would hopefully cease to be an effective force. And that would be the biggest blow for world peace in a long time. It really would. So hopefully that will happen sooner than later. And if they're cracking down on their people and starting to rebuild a nuclear program, I don't see how we can let them continue. I really don't. And we have to get them out of there and put it back in the hands of the Iranian people and the Shah's son. It's better. I know the Shah, a lot of people think the Shah was bad news, but the country was prosperous and the people were free. So hopefully those women who threw off their burqas in that protest that I showed a few weeks back, hopefully they're still doing well, and hopefully that will prevail. That type of freedom and that type of liberation will prevail. Not only with that, taking down that regime and the head of that snake of radical Islam lead to world peace, it will also do so much for the women of the world, the women in that region who've been under such brutal oppression for the last 50 years. So, yeah, I saw pics how beautiful the women were before they covered themselves. So yes, it's been 50 years. Yeah, it'll be 50 years in 2029. So 47 years. So, hopefully that's, again, prayers for that too. We have some things also brewing in Taiwan. This is basically just an overview of the stuff I've been seeing. I couldn't figure out which one of these to focus on today, so I figured I'd focus on all of them. Taiwan has been something that basically has been brewing since I was just longer, actually, ever since Mao took over in China and the government of China fled to Taiwan, the Republic of China. And so I keep hearing, and it seems to be the plan that next year will be the year that China finally moves on to take over Taiwan. And Taiwan is amping up its defenses. I saw a video explaining how Japan and the United States and Australia would respond to China basically crossing the little strait there and taking over. And so we would have basically a regional war, and we'd have more wars, again, wars and rumors of wars, right? But we would also have, the fight would continue, the worldview fight. This is where it inevitably leads. When you have incompatible worldviews like radical Islam and communism going up against the Judeo-Christian, worldview of the West, these are basically incompatible. And the two, radical Islam and communism, are both bullies, really, is what they are. Their worldview says conquer and enslave. Our view says liberate, and free. So again, even though ours is not a warlike worldview, we constantly have to deal with these other worldviews. And there will always there's always going to be a conflict between these. So, and then again, the other one was Cuba, and Cuba Trump is putting on a lot of pressure with oil embargoes, and he's pressuring Cuba to, at the very least, let the people who Castro chased out 60 years ago, even 65 years ago, even longer than that, give them their property back. And again, continue reforms in Cuba and maybe abandon that regime. Cuba's a desolate place anyways. Their cars they still have 1950s era cars that are most of all broken down and just sitting there rusting on the street. They have no economy to speak of. And communism is completely failed there, and Trump is right to put pressure on them, ultimately to give up this communist dream that's really a nightmare, and give the people of Cuba back their freedom. And again, it's just another part of the constant battle, but it's one that's really close to our shores. And it's one where we have people. This is why Nigeria is so different. Okay, we have Chinese people here. We have Taiwanese people here. I know one of my best friends is married to a woman from Taiwan. And we have Cubans here in Florida. And Cuba is right there. And Taiwan is right in the middle of some shipping, right by Japan, which is a big ally of ours. Australia is a big ally of ours. Nigeria is in the middle of Africa. So we just don't focus on it. I don't know that there's a lot of Nigerian people in the United States with political power that can put pressure on our government to help. So that's why I think what Trump is doing to try and help those people is pretty admirable. He doesn't have to. There's no political really advantage to him other than just doing the right thing. So, Lucas, yeah. Mark Carney, has he? Canada's bowed. Okay, so we can't count on Canada. But I did want to go with one final verse on this, and hopefully it won't be too jumpy, but I think it probably will. But I'll try it anyways. It's Daniel 2:21, and let's see. Yeah, now I'm being real. There we go. And I'm going to assume it's up there even though I don't see it. So Daniel 2:21 starts with 2:20. Praise be to the name of our God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. So, control. Oh, did it go up? It did go up. Okay. So God is in control. You could say Trump is doing a lot of these things, which he is, but God is really using him. It's God who changes the times and seasons. It's God who deposes kings and raises up others. Okay. And again, it's something we have to be wise and discerning about in how we react to this, how we view this. Okay. Here we go. I'm back. Yeah, Cuba, it has been dark. Yes, I hear the government shuts down their electricity during the day sometimes. Yeah, even at night, I've seen that there's been darkness going over Cuba. If that isn't an allegory, I don't know what is. Darkness over Cuba. So, but that's how, Cuba was, again, it wasn't a perfect place to be. Again, the mob pretty much owned it or was working with it, and they were on their way to pretty much owning Cuba. So Cuba wasn't exactly, it was a paradise. It was a playground for the rich back in the 50s. But it was headed in a bad place, but it really, really got to a bad place when Castro took over. And again, the naive left. I wasn't quite born yet, but the stories of that revolution where, everybody, all the right people in the United States supported it because communism was this great liberal thing and Castro was this revolutionary against a corrupt government. And everybody celebrated when he took over until they started lining people up in the football stadiums and shooting them. And then all of a sudden, the liberals of America got a real taste of what they were supporting. And that's what communism is. And we talked about it before. It's the thief coming to rob, steal, and just kill, steal, and destroy. That's all it does. That's all that's happened in China. And that's why Taiwan, the government of Taiwan, is worth defending, because they're holding out against the worst of the worst. And Iran, that's why it's worth supporting the great Persian people that should be free, that should be, God bless them through King Cyrus years, centuries ago, when he let Israel go back and rebuild the temple, rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. They've had this really sympathetic relationship with God's people, and they're a blessed people, and they deserve to be free again. And so hopefully God can do a work among them, and hopefully he is through this revolution, and we should be supporting that. So, but most of all, we should be, again, considering ourselves as being under persecution also with the people of Nigeria. And what he said was true. We complain. I've got jumpy internet. I've been struggling with this all morning. It's, and when I put up the verses, it jumps all around. And I have to remember not to use that site, but that's what I complain about. That's what we complain about here. And it's just, if we would even consider and be mindful of our Christian brothers and sisters that are being persecuted and dying, that would put everything in perspective. So, and that's what God calls us to do. He calls us to consider that we are suffering too. And so we should pray without ceasing for them, and pray without ceasing for the world situation, because again, this is what God predicted. Now, whether or not the end is near, whether or not Jesus is coming soon because of wars and rumors of wars, I don't know. My eschatology has been in flux for a while. Okay. But we are closer to his return every day. And the one thing that he constantly tells us to do is to pray and to look up and to wait expectantly for his return. And just like those Christians in Hebrews 11, we are not to consider that this is our home. We are to consider that this life is temporary. Our home is really eternally with God. And whatever suffering and deprivation we have here, which we don't know here, but we might be starting to know, because we're not exempt from that. This is the human condition. War and suffering is the human condition. But we haven't suffered it yet. But Christians around the world, people who are sympathetic to God's people around the world, like the Persians in Iran, the people yearning to be free in Cuba and China and Taiwan. Okay. We can be mindful of them and pray for them, and pray that God would do a work in these different parts of the world. Because Satan's on the move. Satan's always been on the move. We are closer to his return, but there's been wars and rumors of wars. It's the state of mankind. It's the natural state of mankind to be at war and to have unrest, because we're a fallen world. And that's just our state. And that's why God had to send Jesus to die for us. That's how bad our situation is. And that's how radical the solution had to be. So, thank you, AC. Appreciate the amens. Maybe I'm getting a little preachy here too. But again, like the guy said in the view, I'm preaching to myself, because I get caught up in my little petty frustrations too, not realizing that most of the world would love to have the problems I have. So, and the problems we have. So, but here we are with this great technology, talking to each other about it. And the best we can do is just remind ourselves to be in prayer for them, and to consider that we are with them, and they are part of the body. And if they're hurting, we're hurting. So that's 30 minutes. And that's, again, goes fast. So I will be on with Ben tomorrow. And so I will see you then. Thanks for listening, guys. I really appreciate you guys tuning in every day, and everybody who watches later on. I appreciate it. Thank you. Take care.